You're listening to Instead We Made a Pod, a Eurovision podcast brought to you by the Phoenix ESC.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Instead We Made a Pod. I am MJ, and I am joined by a co-host this week. Instead of it being my usual lovely co-host, Adam, I'm joined by another lovely co-host this week, another contributor to Phoenix. It's Liv. Hi, Liv. How are you?
Hey, MJ. I'm okay, thank you. I know I don't sound much like Adam. Sorry about that to anyone listening, but here we are.
Did you want to try and do an Irish accent?
I'm not even going to attempt it.
Probably for the best. Liv, why are you here this week?
Because I am kind of Phoenix's little Melfest expert resident. I love the show. I've been watching it for nearly 10 years now. And of course, you and I both have accreditation. So we can talk all things Melfest from what we have seen, not just on the Saturday night, but also in the week.
Yeah, and truly one of the highlights of my Eurovision season has become just frantically DMing Liv during the Melfest rehearsals. Like, oh my God, are you seeing this? I still remember where I was when the Ganilla rehearsals dropped last year, frantically DMing Liv. Like, this is insane.
Oh my God, what an icon. I miss her so much.
Honestly, can we just have Ganilla back every single year? It wasn't the same without her this year. So, of course, as we have mentioned, this week's episode is all about Melfest. And once again, we would like to thank SVT for giving us accreditation to cover the content to its fullest extent for another year. SVT are an absolutely fantastic broadcaster. They always make it so easy to access their content and to work with them. And we hope that we can keep bringing you Melfest content year on year because it's a great time. With that being said, Liv, what were your thoughts on Melfest this year?
I think for me, it was a hit and miss year. There were some heats that I really looked forward to and some heats that I sort of didn't watch. And that is quite a surprise for me because usually Melfest is my key national final. I would watch it over anything else, but I found myself almost prioritizing other ones over it because I wasn't really feeling kind of strong feelings towards any of the songs in certain heats. I think that there is a problem with Melfest in terms of the songs that we're getting at the minute and the writers behind them. It's very, very clear from the people who won their heats that I think the public are starting to favour the authenticity of the entries a lot more over these kind of usual Melfest writing names that we get. And I think that can only move the contest in a positive direction if SVT realise that maybe the public don't want something so straightforward, clear-cut, and kind of just Sweden by numbers at Eurovision. I was really happy actually to see people like Erik Segerstedt and Gretula make it through. Maybe, not my favourite entries in the contest, but ones that felt so authentic to the artists. That being said, I did enjoy Melfest this year. I did like listening to the songs. I like the way that they've changed it so we can hear the songs earlier as well. I think that's only benefited our artists this year. And yeah, I enjoyed it, but I do think there are things that can be improved.
Yeah, I 100% could not agree with you more. I remember saying in the Melfest episode that we did on the podcast last year that I just felt that it had become a really predictable format. You knew which songs were going to qualify. You knew which acts were going to qualify. And I was pleased to see this year that there seemed to be less returnees, a lot more people competing for the first time. I agree with you. I still think that there's a real problem with the same songwriters producing the same kind of songs. And I really do think that the overall quality of the songs that we got this year was weaker as a result of it. If I think about last year, I did find the format and the sheer amount of returnees made it a really predictable process. But there were a lot of songs that I really liked. I'm thinking about When I'm Gone by Maria Sir. I'm thinking about Que Sera by Medina. Unforgettable, I really liked as well. But then this year, it just felt like with a lot of the songs, it was kind of just more of the same. And I agree with you, Liv. I do think the public are beginning to tire a bit. And I think that if you look at some of the bookies' favourites, obviously there's a clear and far away bookies' favourite to win, and we will be talking about the favourites to win later on in the episode. But if you look at some of the other ones that are maybe just slightly competing, they're either entries that have been written by completely new artists and songwriters, or they're the kind of thing that we just do not get very often at Melfest. And I do think that maybe that is reflective of the fact that like you said, the Swedish public maybe just don't want to see this Melfest cookie cutter, Jimmy Joker Thornfelt, Thomas Gson, Jimmy Jonsson kind of format anymore. Maybe they're crying out for something a bit different. I do, and we will talk about this later, I do think that ultimately that might bring about some positive changes for Melfest this year. I'm not sure it's going to bring about a lot of changes to Sweden at Eurovision at the moment. I think that there's a real far and away winner. And I think that for Sweden as well, we do criticize kind of the predictability of what Sweden sends sometimes, but ultimately it always benefits them. Sweden have done well and will probably continue to do well this year as well. So is there a real incentive for them to switch up what they're doing unless they absolutely tanked, which I don't think they will? Probably not. But what we do know about Sweden is that when things do go wrong, they do tend to act on it and reflect and make changes pretty quickly, which we've also seen in Melfest this year and which we will talk about in a moment. But before we do that, Melfest has 5 heats before we get to the final. That means that we hear a lot of songs that ultimately we don't get to hear at the final. So we are just going to spend a small time talking about what could have been. So we are going to be discussing the songs that did not make it out of their heats that we kind of wish had. Liv, what were you sad to see not go through to the final?
It's actually quite a recent one, and it is Wilhelm Buchhaus, I'm Yours. I very rarely am captivated from the very first second of the song to the very, very last moment, but this performance was shot so beautifully. The song was great. His vocals literally sounded like it could have been a studio version. It was just so perfect, and I was really rooting for him to make it through to the final. And I think when it came to it being between him and Scarlett, it was quite clear that I think Scarlett were going to make it through. But for someone to come into Melfest as a debutee and perform like that, have a stage show like that with very little fan base as well. He only had a few thousand followers when I first followed him on Instagram. And to come in and come fourth in a heat, when you have names like Arvin Garner as well in that heat as well, it's just amazing. And I think he should be so proud of himself with what he presented. I've also seen a lot of comments from people wondering why this didn't get through and wishing that it had done and saying how well it actually could have done. I would have loved to have seen that shot with him where he's got his back to the camera and the audience have their lights up in that Strawberry Arena next week. It would have looked amazing. It already did, but with the size and the scale of that arena, it is such a moment. I don't even know how they managed to shoot it in a way that they did. It was so clear and so just music video-esque. Yeah, I am really, really sad we're not going to be seeing this, but I will be watching that performance for a long time to come because it is by far, in the amount of years I've been watching Melfest, one of my absolute favourite performances that I've ever seen on that stage.
I absolutely loved I'm Yours as well, which is surprising to me because this isn't normally the kind of entry that I really back at Melfest or even really at Eurovision. But I agree with you. It was something about that staging that really elevated it. I thought there was something so cinematic about it, starting off with those kind of close-up intimate shots in that apartment setup. But then you're right, that shot where he is sort of looking out to the audience and you can see all the lights and there's that big anthemic chorus. I actually gasped a little bit. I was like, I would love to see that in the Strawberry Arena, which I still always want to call Friends Arena, and it really confuses me that I have to call it the Strawberry Arena. But yeah, I agree with you. I would have loved to see this reach the final. I think that if it was elevated as it was in its heat, it would have been even better in the final. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. I am really glad that he placed fourth, but I really hope that we do get him back in a future Melfest with, I mean, I don't know how he'd even top that, but, you know, if he did manage to come back with an even stronger overall package, I think that we could be looking at a final placement in the future, definitely. And it was his first time in the adult Melfest as well. He'd competed in, you know, the former edition of Junior Melfest a bunch of times. So it was nice to see him come for his first attempt with such a strong song. I did find that I thought a lot of the songs that made it through, I thought deserved it. Or they ultimately did go through as a result of Pina Colada. A song that I was really sad to not see get a chance to go to the final for me was Funniest Thing by Nomi Tales. This is the kind of song that I tend to really respond to. I thought the staging was really beautiful. I liked that there was this kind of fairy, witchy vibe. I almost wonder if maybe this was just not right for Melfest. I almost wish that she'd submitted this to more of an MGP where I think that maybe it would have got a better reception. And I don't know, maybe Melfest just wasn't right for this song, but I would have loved to see it in the final. What did you think of Funniest Thing, Liv?
I was so certain that this would have made it through in that heat. And I think Eric winning the heat really threw everything off, because I remember seeing this performance and I absolutely loved it. I think her vocals were outstanding. I thought the staging was amazing. It was really different, actually, for Melfest, I feel. And I agree with you. I think it would have fared so much better in like MGP or something. It does feel very Norwegian, actually. And yeah, it's a shame for her, but I think that she will potentially come back in the future with something even stronger, because I do think she has the potential to get to a final in Melfest one day if that's what she's turning up with the first time that she's in it.
Definitely. And of course, she didn't make the chance to get to the final, but there were two more songs that got a second chance at the final, and they are Hush Hush by Mayra Omar and Yeehaw by Dolly Style. Both these songs got through the new and improved Final Kvalet format, which is a reworking of what was formerly Andra Johnson. Liv, what did you think about the changes that were made to Final Kvalet this year and the songs that have gone through?
I think they were really positive. I think SVT really learned from the reaction to it last year and made the right moves to ensure that that didn't happen again. I think part of the reason was because of the fact we had two Heat Fivers last year making the final, and also because fan favourite Fröken Snusk lost. And I don't think they wanted that to happen again, because it really did kick off. So I think the changes were good. I didn't quite understand them, but I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not going to try. But yeah, listen, they give me numbers on a screen and now we'll just go with the flow. I'm really, really happy with how it went this year. I thought the format was really good. I thought the way that they did the show kind of after Heat 5 was really, really well done. It was concise. It was quick. We got to see the entries in the final. We got to see a longer clip of the performances, which is something we missed last year, which is also why I think Annika and Jay ended up getting through that time, was because we'd just seen those performances. We had barely any seconds of these performances that had been in previous heats. So I'm glad that they did that. I think if they're going to keep it, they need to keep it like this. I do miss the Second Chance show. I won't lie. Like, I did really enjoy that one. But I think if this is how it's going to end up and this is how it's going to go for the future, then they've done a really, really good job in just a year of polishing everything up. And I'm really happy with who got through.
I would not be surprised if we see Final Kvalet come back in this format again, purely because everyone seemed really happy with the way it turned out. In my opinion, the two songs that went through absolutely deserved to go through. They were clearly the fan favourites. I mean, especially Hush Hush, which qualified by a landslide. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get this back. I wasn't even going to try and understand the maths, but I did think that prioritising how people had done in their respective heats rather than a recent televote, which, like you said, probably would have massively favoured the more recent entries, to me was absolutely the best way to do it. And ultimately it meant that, you know, the third placer from Heat 1 was the overall winner of that as well. So that's, to me, ultimately the most positive thing. I was scathing about Final Kvalet last year. It really, really showed just how much recency bias plays into people's voting decisions. I thought it was so shocking for, people like Frökensnust, who, Unger and Fria was such a huge hit in Sweden, for her to not make it through, but not only to not make it through, but for her to have to go and sit in that arena in Karlstad and then just have to go home. It was just so clear that people were not happy with it. I know that there was a lot of booing in the arena and that the atmosphere was incredibly tense after those decisions were made. So it was really clear that something had to change. I was, because of that, really skeptical about Final Kvalet this year. I was glad that it was only out of 5 acts, because I thought, well, at least that's going to counter some of the recency bias. Someone from Heat 5 probably will make it through, but it'll only be one of them, so that's okay. But then ultimately, actually, neither of the most recent acts did. And it was, in my opinion, the two that, out of the 5, I think deserved another shot at the final. And I'm also really happy for Dolly Style. They've competed in Melfest a bunch of times. They've got as far as Anders Johnson, but they've never made it to a final. And this will be their first time. They are second in the running order, so probably won't yield a huge result for them. But I think for them, getting to a final is a major milestone. So really, really happy with those two. We're now going to be talking about who we think has the best shot of actually winning. To do that, we are going to be talking about the top 3 in the bookies odds. We should stress that this is the top 3 in the bookies odds at the time of recording this podcast, which is the Sunday directly after Heat 5. Obviously, bookies odds are always in a constant state of flux, so if these 3 are not the top 3 anymore, do not blame us. In third place in the bookies odds to win Melfest this year is a debutante, and in fact, a whole team of debutante songwriters as well. And that is Believe Me by Grätzila. Liv, why do you think that this is maybe so high in the bookies odds?
I think when I first saw this, and the reason why potentially it is so high in the odds, is because it really does give like that old Melodifestivalen feel. When I was watching it, I was thinking this felt very sort of late 2000s to me, and songs that would do very, very well then. And it's timeless as well. He is a great performer, a great vocalist. He's very captivating when he's on the stage, has a lot of stage presence, and he just sells the song. And I don't think anybody else could do it like he does. I really like his voice. I'm not a big fan of this song. I've heard his other music and I much prefer it, but I did see him when the artists were all announced, and he was one of the ones where I wasn't 100% familiar with who he was prior to him being announced, but I just had a feeling that he was going to bring something that was going to be really well liked and really special, and ultimately he has done. I don't think this is going to end up winning. I think it will do very, very well in the jury, but I think his televote now, and we will get onto it in just a moment, might have been dashed a little by another entry that's come through. But I think he's going to do well. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, this song, I'm pretty sure, is written by brand new writers to the contest, and it won its heat. And that is only a positive thing. It's going to be great for him in the final. This is going to look amazing in that arena. I can't wait to see it. But I think with his position in the running order as well, it's not necessarily being set up to be the one that goes to Eurovision this year. But if it does, I think it will do super well. We don't have anything like this at the moment. And yeah, I really, really enjoy it. It's just not my favourite of this year's entries.
To me, this song, I think, best encapsulates what we were saying at the beginning of the podcast about how maybe Swedish voters are kind of crying out for something that's not just the usual Melfest Swedish songwriting factory. Grätzila is new to Melfest, and the songwriters that he's written this song with are people that he works with a lot. So it's not even just, okay, we're going to put you with these songwriters, create something together. These are people that Gretzula makes music with a lot of the time. And I think that you can really tell that it is slightly different to some of the music that he puts out outside of the contest. It's quite clear to me that he's taken what he does do ordinarily and put those touches on it to make it right for Melfest. But I think that you can really tell that he's done that with people who know his voice, know his music, know how he works. And I think that that just brings an element of authenticity to this that maybe sometimes songs in Melfest lack. And I think it's almost not that these are the same kind of songs as well, but maybe the response that we have seen to this is kind of like the response that we saw back in 2022 with Hold Me Closer, where people are responding to the heart that's behind this, and that it's very clear that this is what the artist themselves wants to send. And I would love to see more of that in future editions of Melfest, because I do sometimes think that we lack some authenticity in some of the entries that we get. I would love to see more songs that come from the sort of heart and soul of the people making them, rather than just, you know, oh yeah, I've had this in my laptop for a while, let's give it to Victoria Silvstedt. Although I do love Victoria Silvstedt, and I'm sad that she's not in the final. I agree with you. I think the staging for this is phenomenal. I think that there's something very 70s kind of Freddie Bowie about him as a performer, the way that he interacts with the camera. There's those shots of him lying on the floor or standing on top of the piano looking down into the camera. And I think that that shot of him descending from the big piano at the beginning is going to be so incredible in the Strawberry Arena next week. I don't see this winning. I think there's a really clear winner. And I agree with you. I think there's also now a really clear second place as well. And that's a shame. But ultimately, it is his first attempt at doing Melfest. So if he did come third, fourth, that would still be really impressive, especially because he is now the only person in the final with an entirely new artist, entirely new songwriters. You know, it's clear that that's quite a difficult milestone to achieve. It doesn't happen very often in Melfest. So great for him that he's got the chance to go out there and represent his music and win some new fans as well. Second in the bookies' favourites to win is a song that has really, really crept up in terms of people's responses to it. And that is Kai with Bada Bada Bastu. Liv, why do you think that this has just taken the viewing public by storm this year?
I think just because it's fun and it doesn't seem very Melfest. And I know they're Finnish, but it does seem very UMK. Like, I could see this in UMK so easily. The performance is great. I love the staging. I love the way they sing it. It's silly, but it's serious. They seem like lovely, lovely people. It's definitely a crowd pleaser. And there is no way that this, I don't think, isn't winning the televote. It's just going to landslide by the terms of the public's response to this. They love it. They want it to win. I think, and maybe this is just me coping with potentially my favourite, who we will talk about in a minute, not winning. But I think that the jury isn't going to give this enough to see it go to Basel. I would love it because I don't think Sweden have sent an entry in Swedish since the late 90s. And the last time we had Swedish in Eurovision was 2012, and that was from Finland. So it'd be super cool if Sweden was sending a Finnish artist, but in their language. I don't know, though, if this is to win Melfest, if it will do as well as it could do at Eurovision. Feelings are, Eurovision is a very televote heavy type of year this year. There are a lot of songs vying for that televote right now. And this is another one of them, which could actually harm its chances. I think in any other year, this would do incredibly well. And it might turn out to be the televote entry that people really latch onto in a way that they did with Cha Cha Cha. But I feel like it could end up being part of that very split televote result, which ultimately doesn't give Sweden the best result that they could have. But then it's a case of, do Sweden want the best result they can have, or is it going to be great for them to show their language again on this stage for the first time in like 25 years? I do enjoy it. I can see why the public love it. It is very catchy. I do find myself walking around humming it or singing the chorus. I just feel like it might not win, and I think people's expectations are very, very high for it too. But there's a very clear competitor to it, which I think might end up taking it in the end. But I do wish them so much luck. Again, it's a case of another entry coming through from an artist that's debuting in the contest that has really shot up the odds, wasn't really on anyone's radar beforehand, and they've done an amazing job at it. So I wish them so much luck next week. I'm going to really enjoy it from home. It's going to close off the show so well. But I do think that, unfortunately for them, there is someone in this contest that is going to, by a very small margin, take that win.
Yeah, I would love for this to win Melfest, purely because I don't think anyone would expect Sweden to send a song like this. It's the same reason why I really rooted for Ungar and Fria last year until it got massively screwed over by Final Kvalet's format last year. I just think that this is not something that people expect from Sweden at Eurovision. And we've talked about the fact that Melfest can be predictable. I think that a victory for Kai would really allow Sweden to maybe open their minds a little bit to other kinds of music, to sending a song in the Swedish language. Liv, am I right in thinking that this is the only Swedish language song in the final?
I think it is. You are right. It is the only one there, which I think is such a shame when it comes to Sweden and in Melfest and in Eurovision, that they don't seem to want to pick songs in their language. But I think maybe this could have an effect next year. The way it is favoured and the way the public have loved it and have rallied behind it could really make an impact next year on more songs in Swedish coming through, hopefully.
I would absolutely love that. I really love it when Eurovision acts or national final acts send songs in their native language. I think that we've slowly seen an increase of that at Eurovision as well, particularly since sort of this decade, sort of 2021 in particular. We had a lot of songs in their native language doing really well, making the top 5. I'd love to see Sweden actually send something in Swedish because, like you said, it's been a really long time. I think this is so much fun. Love the concept of it. I love the staging of it. It is so insanely catchy. I do find myself singing it all the time. I also think that 2023 really cemented just how much of a Sweden versus Finland rivalry there is. Not just at Eurovision, but just in general, in everything in Scandinavia. And I think that a song like this would be a really good way to sort of cement sort of Swedish-Finnish relations at Eurovision almost. I've seen the TikTok that's been going around of Erika Vickman in the sauna with the boys from Kai, and I think it's really cute that they're already starting to make content together. It would also potentially mean, I mean, Liv, you and I both ended up at Liverpool at various points back in 2023 for Eurovision. This could also possibly mean that we got another portable sauna in Basel. I think that every song should just have a sauna. I would really like to see that. I think this is going to do really well with a televote. I was initially really skeptical about how this might do. Not because this doesn't have bags of televote appeal, it really does, but because of Sweden's televoting system for Melfest. The age group format often means that these sort of light-hearted entries often get really screwed over and that younger voters tend to favour them, but that means that ultimately they don't do as well in the televote as everyone's expecting. I do think that now that we've seen the massive response this has got, we could be looking at a televote win. Now, do I think that this will win Melfest? Probably not. I'm not going to rule it out and say never, but I do think that ultimately there is an act that juries are going to favour, and that I think is also probably going to do quite well with certain aspects of the televote as well. And I think that ultimately that's probably going to mean second place is the limit for Barabada Bastu. But that's still an amazing result for a Swedish language song at Melfest. Like you said, Liv, kind of snuck up on everyone. No one was really paying attention to it until, Heat 4 rehearsals. But I really hope that this does open people's eyes to, more Swedish language songs in future editions of Melfest, and maybe just more of this kind of thing at Melfest as well. And maybe we'll see something in this vein representing Sweden next year. I certainly hope so. However, there is a clear and away bookies' favourite to win Melfest and represent Sweden at Eurovision. And that artist is already doing pretty well in the bookies' odds to win Eurovision as well. It is, of course, Måns Zelmerlöw returning to Melfest and possibly to Eurovision 10 years after he won the Contest of Heroes in 2015. This year, he is back with the song Revolution. Liv, you are possibly the biggest Måns Zelmerlöw fan that I have ever met, so why don't you take it away?
Thank you. I definitely would give myself that title as well. I want to start this off by saying I would not be on this podcast right now. I would probably not even be in Phoenix. I wouldn't have met MJ or any of the people that I've met if it wasn't for Måns winning Eurovision in 2015. He is the reason why I discovered what Melodifestivalen was, what national finals were, got me so much deeper into this fandom, let me meet the people that I know now, some of my closest friends, and I never thought I would see him back in this contest. And I've followed him for 10 years, and it honestly means the world to me to see him come back with something that is running away in the odds with a chance to win. It's a little bit nerve-wracking because of how much people have responded now to Kai, that I'm not 100% on the fact that he is going to take it next weekend, but I would absolutely love him too. I love this song. It's one of the best songs he has released in a very long time. I love the staging. It is so well done. He is a great singer. The power in his voice is beyond me. When he's got that microphone so far away from him and you can hear him so loud, it's crazy. He's so charismatic. He owns the stage. He knows what he's doing. He's a very reliable performer. I'd be so happy if we were sending him to Eurovision for the UK because I would have no worries. I think it's not as strong as Heroes. It's actually, I think, probably my least favourite of his Melodifestivalen attempts. My favourite is Karamia. But the staging is what sells it. And I think that it was the same with Heroes. It was the staging that sold that song. And I think, again, looking at Loreen with Tattoo, that I don't think is her strongest Melfest attempt, but it was the staging that sold that. Sweden know Eurovision, and this is a pure example of Sweden knowing how to do Eurovision so well. Will it win Eurovision if it gets there? I think it has a very, very good chance. As I've already mentioned, it's a very televote heavy year. The jury are going to be looking for something like this, and I don't think it's going to landslide the jury like Loreen did or Nemo did, but I think it will have a very good chance. He himself has said that, it's not about winning, it's about how far he can get and stuff, but I think it's about winning as a fan. I want it to win, and I'll be very sad if it doesn't, because I would love to have that opportunity to see one of my favourite artists, the reason why I'm even doing any of this, win the contest and go to Eurovision and potentially win that too. I'm just really, really proud of him, to be honest, as a fan speaking, and I just really hope he does well next weekend. Even if he doesn't win, I think he can be really proud of what he's come back with, how far he's got. I think there hasn't been a winner of Melodifestivalen who hasn't won their heat since 2013, I think. And obviously this won the heat over Kai. So I think that probably sets him up for a good result next weekend. I think the age group system, as you've already mentioned, might actually affect Kai a little bit if Måns is coming second, third, and I think might end up winning some of the older age groups as well. I think his televote won't be as high as Kai at all, but I think it might be sort of a Cornelia Jacobs Anders Bag situation where she wins the jury, so Måns wins the jury, Kai wins the televote like Anders did, almost landsliding it, but ultimately don't get enough to beat Måns, who's at the top. I'm just really looking forward to this next weekend. I told myself I wouldn't get too attached to it when it came out and when I heard he was going to be in Melfest, but I need it to win now because this will be my Eurovision winner. And I would love to have a season where I can follow it from start to finish with Måns in Eurovision again. I think it would be a great return for him. And yeah, I'm just really, really excited for next weekend now. I really hope it goes well for him.
And of course, by the time we get to the final, we'll be gearing up for a space where we talk about Sweden's result. So I am telling anyone listening to this podcast ahead of the final, the temper and the mood of that space is going to hinge heavily on how Sweden do. Well, how Måns does, not how Sweden does.
If Måns does well, I might cry. If anyone heard the space when Sam Ryder's rehearsal picks came out, that might actually be what I'm like on Sunday. I am going to be a mess. And if he doesn't do well, I will also cry. So tune in.
Yeah, regardless of how Måns does at Melfest, you're going to hear Liv cry. You just need to tune in to find out whether it's going to be tears of joy or tears of grief and devastation. I think that this is probably going to win Melfest. And I agree with you. I think we're looking at a Cornelia Jacobs, Anders Bagger type situation where I don't think that televote win is necessarily a lock for Måns anymore. Not seeing how well Kai have done. I think last time I checked the YouTube stats for both videos, Kai had something like 1.6 million views on their video, whereas I think Revolution had over 600,000. So I do think that Kai probably have televote locked at this point. But I think that the jury is going to come out massively in favour of Måns, and I think that we're ultimately going to see him clinch a win. Wild that we're potentially talking about him not winning, because before we saw how much Barabadabastu had caught people's attention, you couldn't have told me that there was no way this wasn't winning. I still do think that Måns is a shoo-in to go to Basel. I just think that there's more of an outside chance of someone else getting it now, which at least is going to make the final really exciting, because I suppose I loved Tattoo in 2023. It was my, Melfest winner, and it ended up being my Eurovision winner as well. But that still didn't mean that some excitement wasn't taken out of the Melfest final, because you essentially knew who won. And it was the same last year with Marcus and Martinez, Unforgettable as well. I knew that was going to win. I still do think that Revolution is locked for a win, but at least it's not a dead cert, which is going to make results a lot more interesting than they have been for the past couple of years. I do not think that Revolution is as strong a song as Heroes. I think that what that ultimately comes down to is that Heroes was, for its time, I think people forget how current a pop song Heroes was. It had that kind of a Avicii element to it, which was huge in the mid 2010s. And when you paired that with that staging, which we see staging like that all the time at Eurovision and in national finals like Melfest now, it cannot be stressed enough just how innovative the staging of Heroes with the iconic Balloon Boy was at the time. No one was doing it at Eurovision, and now everyone does staging like that at Eurovision. All of that combined with the fact that regardless of how you feel about his music, whether you're a fan like Liv or whether you're not, he is a really incredible performer. He's incredibly charismatic. He's a good-looking guy. He can really sing. When you put all those ingredients together, iconic staging, a song that for its time was incredibly current, with this handsome, charismatic performer, it's a Eurovision winning formula. I think that this year we've got the handsome, charismatic performer. Måns still looks damn good 10 years on from his Eurovision win. The staging, I think, is brilliant. I did see a lot of people on the timeline comparing this to Maps by Leslie Roy. All I will say is Leslie Roy wishes that Maps had looked this good. I think that ultimately what makes the package not as strong as Heroes is that Revolution, to me, sounds like the kind of thing we would have got at Eurovision in 2015. I don't think it's as updated and current, and the lyrics of the song are maybe kind of cheesy. I'm not saying that I don't think this could win Eurovision. I agree with you, Liv. I think that there's a lot of televote heavy, friendly songs splitting the vote this year. And I think that ultimately we could be looking at another situation where a jury winner clinches it because of that, because I think the televote is going to be split a lot of different ways. But I do wonder if some of the internal selections that we're starting to see come through might compete with Måns for a jury win and maybe split the vote in that sense as well. We've recently got the Netherlands, which I don't think it's winning Eurovision, but I think it's going to pick up a lot of jury votes. I think that Austria's song, and from what people are saying about it, sounds like it's got bags of jury potential. And we haven't heard France's song yet, but from what we have heard about it, I think that has potential to do very well as well, if all the pieces come together. However, I'm happy to see this go to Eurovision. I know that Måns loves the Eurovision Song Contest and is really going for it again, just because he has that love for the contest. And he's a great representative in that sense. It's always great to have a representative who is passionate about the contest to the extent that Måns is. He's pretty much featured in near enough every edition of Eurovision that we have in some capacity since he won. And I think it's great to see someone that just unashamedly, unabashedly just loves the contest so much. The only thing I really worry about for Måns is all that flying paper on stage. Me and Liv obviously watched the rehearsals for Melfest together. We DM each other sort of while we're watching them. What are you thinking of this? What are you thinking of that? And I just remember a moment in the rehearsals on Thursday for Heat 4 where a bit of paper just flies up and it just smacks Måns straight in the mouth. And he was just performing with that bit of paper on his mouth for ages. And of course, it's Måns Zelmerlöw, so he just pulled it off. There was a slight giggle, but he absolutely didn't lose composure that much. I just hope for his sake they found a way to sort out that paper. And also just for Liv's sake as well, because if Måns got unseated by a floating bit of paper, I actually do think that we wouldn't be seeing tears of grief or tears of joy. I think we'd be seeing a full-blown nervous breakdown on the face, wouldn't we, Liv?
Definitely. I'd be going to war with all trees. I need them gone.
Death to tree.
Literally. If that happens on Saturday, I might lose it. Like, I am going to just sit there and cry. I'm so anxious for it that, like, if that happens, I'm just turning off.
Måns got unseated by a bit of paper, so I blocked the Amazonian rainforest on Twitter. Oh, man. So, fingers crossed that the paper flies where it needs to and stays as far as it physically can away from Måns Zelmerlow's face. Because if not, I think Liv is going to take up a career as a lumberjack and just chop down any tree that she can find. So we are going to round off this podcast, as we have been with this new format that we've been doing this season, by talking about who's our preferred winner and who is our predicted winner, so that we can see later down the line if we are correct. Liv, who's your preferred winner? Who's your predicted winner?
I think after that last discussion, it's very clear that my preferred winner is Revolution by Måns Zelmerlöw, and I do predict that this will win by a very small margin. I hope it does, and I think it will. And I'm just really nervous for the results now, but I think that's the way it's going to go. But I think the winner in our hearts, MJ, is Andreas Lundstedt, isn't it?
How have we gone the entire podcast without mentioning Andreas Lundstedt and Vicious? Liv, why did we latch on to this song as much as we did?
Because he came out and he's just such an icon. The way he performs is just, he knows what he's doing. He was in Alcazar, but he is so good at it. We love the song. He, as far as Google tells me, did a tour where he was singing George Michael songs. Now, if you need to know anything about me and MJ, is we love George Michael. This was giving us George Michael. Andreas, if you ever hear this, in the rare chance that you do, you have 2 fans at Phoenix, and we love you.
We do. And listen, if you want to give us free tickets to your George Michael tribute act, we will be front and center. I think my favorite thing during the rehearsals of Andrea was he really backed off from quite a big note near the end, which makes sense because when you're rehearsing, you don't want to strain your voice. You really want to save those big money notes for when you're going to need them. My thing was that he backed off from this massive note. And I was like, okay, we've seen people do that. But then directly into the microphone, so loudly that I was listening in my office with headphones on. And I got a little fright because he backed off from the big note, but then immediately went, woo, really loudly into the microphone. And I was like, all that protecting your voice for what? And I thought it was a one-off and maybe he was just swept up in the moment. He fully wasn't. He did that in every single rehearsal. Bro was just having the time of his life on that stage. And who can blame him? I am so sorry we're not seeing Vicious in the final, especially because it was written by Laurel Barker, poet laureate in Sweden. Better luck next year, girlie, because you'll probably be back. My preferred winner is Bada Bada Bastu, purely because I would love to see Sweden do something a little bit different and something that we just don't expect from them. And I think that this would be the perfect opportunity for them to do it. But ultimately, my prediction is that I do think that Revolution by Måns Zelmerlöw is going to clinch it. I think that it just has too much jury appeal and a decent enough televote appeal as well, that I just think that things are going to align for Måns to come back to Basel. That is all we have time for in terms of talking about Melfest. We would like to once again thank SVT for giving us the opportunity to cover this contest again. Please allow us to keep covering you in the future, SVT. We love you, especially the changes that were made to Final Qualet this year. Just keep doing what you're doing. In future episodes, obviously, national final season is rapidly coming to an end, but that does not mean that you are going to miss out on any podcast episodes. For our next episode, Adam is going to be back, and we are going to be talking about what we feel are the winners and losers of national final season. National finals that we felt went well versus national finals that we felt did not go so well. And we may have a special guest for that one as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that. We will also, as we start getting more of them, be doing an episode where we talk about some of the internal selections and our thoughts on them. And it really is those internal selections that can make or break a Eurovision year and take it from being a not so great one to a really great, even better one. So as we start getting more of those, we will, of course, be talking about them. Liv, before we go, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, or X, should I say. My account handle
You can
is
say Twitter.
I'll say Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. My account handle is live_live. _live__. And also, I'm doing the TikToks at the minute for Phoenix. So please give us a follow over there if you like to laugh about Eurovision.
Yes, I will try and join you on your TikTok game. But apart from that one Gary Barlow one that I did, which I know Liv really appreciated, I'm just not quick enough on the mark with these things. Whereas Liv, absolutely fantastic TikToks. Go and follow us over there if you haven't already. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at the Phoenix ESC. We're also on Blue Sky and Instagram. And you can check out our website, phoenixesc.com, where we've been producing a lot of content in the run-up to national finals. And we'll also be writing a lot more posts about some of the acts now that we have them, discussing their career and how they got to Eurovision. And of course, if you do follow us on Twitter, you will know that we do spaces most Sundays where we talk about Super Saturdays and how they've been going and our thoughts on all the songs. And they're always a really good laugh. So come check us out. Until then, I hope that you all enjoy Melfest and we'll see you on the other side of that. Bye, everyone.